This is November 17th, 2018, and we're out here at the Mojave Air and Spaceport. Al and Cathy Hansen are supposed to give us a presentation today, and these are their airplanes on display out in front of the restaurant.
Yeah, I just set this down. I can stand.
Welcome everyone to Play Saturday. I'm Cathy Hansen, president of the Mojave Transportation Museum. My husband and I are going to hopefully not bore you with airplane pictures. We've been on a few adventures in our lives over the past 30 some odd years. And I guess we'll just launch into it. Al's been flying since, gosh, he went to college in Ames, Iowa, and I think for 1 year. It was through a winter. If any of you who have been to Iowa, you understand that. But while he's in college, his dad is sending him money, and what's he do with it? He takes flying lessons, of course. I learned, and what year was that? It was, when did you go to college? Let's see, you graduated in the 50s, early 50s. I learned to fly at Barnes Aviation and received my license in 1975. I went to Bill Barnes and I said, Bill, I just got out of the hospital, and Dr. Holmes, many of you remember Randy Holmes, he came in to me and he says, you almost died on us, and he's chewing me out. And I said, I can't die, I haven't learned how to fly. And he thought I was nuts, and I probably was, but I was serious. I needed, that's something I always wanted to do from the time I was 4. So I went to Bill and I said, Bill, I've got to learn how to fly, but I don't have any money. So can I work with shoe laying in the office? I'll work in the shop. I know how to cover wings, and I'm really good at scrubbing toilets. I can do that. And he said, okay. Well, Des McCarthy heard me, and he said, if you're going to work your time off, I'll be your instructor and not charge you. So that's how I got my license. I'd work in the office with Shuling, and I don't know how many of you knew her. What a neat lady. And at the end of the day, we'd add up all the receipts, and I'm using a calculator. Not Shuley, no, she uses an abacus. And we'd race, and she'd always win. I hope that's not my phone, I'm going to run over it. Who was it I was talking to the other day, and I said, oh, and I tell him I can't see, but I smell really good. Anyway, Al is a collector of airplanes. He buys and sells and trades, and he's had some partners through the years. Any old-timers will remember Tony Actis. They used to do train wrecks. When a train would wreck, he'd go out there with his old 1946 Browning crane and pick it up, the rail cars, put them on a flatbed and haul them off. And they did a lot of crazy things together, but they also flew together. But 2 of his partners that I'll show you some of the airplanes that we had was Darrell Greenemeyer and Asher Ward. And Darrell just recently passed away, but we were on a lot of really kind of neat adventures with Darrell. And I used to think, boy, I'm with Darrell Greenemeyer flying in an airplane, and he flew SR-71s, and he must be a really great pilot. Why is the stick shaker going? Doesn't he know what to do? Darrell, you're going too slow. I'm kind of a backseat pilot. But anyway, we're in a C-123, yeah. The things that we did, I don't think I'd do today. But when you're young and dumb, you do all kinds of things. So let's get started. We'll go to the first airplane. That's a B-23 Dragon. And again, Al was partners with Asher Ward when he got that. And yeah, that was in competition, I believe, with the C-47 or the DC-3. Let me see. This particular one was built by Douglas Aircraft in Long Beach, completed in June 1940. And the military designated it the UC-67. And it was leased to the University of Washington in Seattle, and it was damaged during a landing in Kingman, and that's where Al and Asher picked it up. And so they brought it back to Mojave. And I remember being at Phil and Barbara's house one night, and Todd was going through a bunch of pictures, and he says, I don't know why I took a picture of that or something, and I'm, oh my God, it's a B-23. But yeah, it's a unusual airplane. There weren't that many made, but they got it, and McCord Air Museum up in Washington wanted it, so that's why they brought it back here to restore it for them. And what was the guy's name that helped you fly that up there? Arsdale, Bob. Was it Bob?
That's right, Cheeseville or something, but we heard about this airplane in the Air Force Museum. We've made a lot of trades with them, but this is the first one, and they would trade 2 C-123s for that airplane if we could get it together and get it delivered to McCord Air Force Base.
And everybody wants a C-123.
So people from the from Washington University, when they had their problem over at Kingman, they broke the left gear. So, and also did away with the prop on the left side, and the one on the right too didn't do it any good. But anyway, I made some steel parts to replace that landing gear stuff, and they, when they pulled it off the runway over at Kingman, they yanked the tail wheel out from under it too, and so that was bad. But anyway, made all those little parts out of steel because we could do it fast. And then this other guy and I flew it up to McCord, and it flew beautiful. It's a nice airplane. But in any case, we came out with 2 C-123s for it, and that was.
That's the day they were leaving here, and it was snowing. Obviously, there's snow on the nose. Let me see if this is the, that's the C-7. There's snow on the, and that's the B-29. It was in December. Go to the next one. But they had painted it up on the cowlings and whatnot. But I think after it got to McCord, they even changed the paint scheme to go with a particular squadron. But I think you flew it gear down, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Go to the next one. I think it shows it. Yeah, tails up. Wow. Isn't that pretty with the snow on the mountains? Was that right here? It was right here. Yeah, it was right here. Yeah. And what engine? Do you know? Let me see if I have the statistics. I can't remember the engines. It doesn't say. I've got the serial number was 390036. You know, it's really
R2000s.
R2000s, yeah. And the next one, does it show it in the air? No. Okay. Next slide. This is his 104 lineup at Mojave Airport. And this is in like 1985 and 86. We actually had 7 104s. They were not flyers. He had watched Darrell set the record at Tonopah, Mud Lake. 200 feet, and Darrell went 988 miles an hour, .26 or something. 4 runs, and that was the average speed. 200 feet off the deck, and Al says you could see the airplane coming, you could see the smoke of that J-79, and it went by, and there was no sound. And then all of a sudden, the sound just hit you and just about knocked everyone over. I mean, you're so low. And yeah, and he says there was a big red eye. But he always wanted a 104. So Al got a 104 and was telling his friend Asher, wow, you know, people would really like to see these 104s in a museum, I bet. And Asher said, nobody wants to see an old 104. Yes, they would. It's a fabulous airplane. Dick will tell you, he flew them. And they called him the Zipper. He says, because he zipped right along. I guess so. It did Mach 2. But 2 weeks later, Asher comes back and says, we can use all the 104s you can get. The colonel wants, he can place 104s all over. That's when Al called Darrell, said, hey, Darrell, we've got a deal where if we can get a bunch of 104s together and put them in different museums, I don't know which airplanes. Do you remember which airplanes you were getting for all the 104s? Was that the one, the Caribou?
No, it was 123.
Two turning, two burning. Anyway, 123, I'm not putting it down, it was a great airplane, used a lot in Vietnam. But anyway, there's our 104 lineup, and this is a Gloucester Meteor. And that belonged to Al Letcher at the time. Of course, Dick remembers Al. And
whatever happened to that? Did he ever fly?
it flew. Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, that's why Al ended up with a broken eardrum. Al was coming down a little fast and broke his eardrum in the Meteor. But, and I'll tell you later on, but we had it, somehow we ended up with a Meteor, and Neil Armstrong came out here and was doing his TV series, First Lights, and Skip Holmes flew the Meteor for the TV show, and it ended up, it's in Edwards, that Meteor. It was painted white there for Wonder Woman, because it was in the Wonder Woman TV series, and she's holding it. I mean, oh, she's gorgeous. She could do anything. She's beautiful. Anyway, go to the next one. We'll see what we've got. Push again. There we go. This is one that's getting ready. That's his 240Z. Somebody asked me if that's why I married him. No. I was driving a 66 Corvette. Why would, no. It was the Commander, the Aero Commander, that really got me. I mean, my God, the shape of that airplane is like an A-26. Anyway, I'm sorry. This is one that was, I think this was going to a museum back east. Next slide, well, look, let's see. Push again. This one's going to Merced. And there's Al's 1946 Browning crane. Oh, that's belongs in a museum. But anyway, we're going to load it onto this low bed. Is that a Kozak trailer? That's the tail of the Meteor after it was painted camouflage. Next slide, and I'll show you what happened. Okay, next.
Oh no.
We're on the way to Merced, and we're following him. And we didn't know the nose wheel was going down into the wood in the truck. Well, the nose is going down, the tail is coming up. And so we followed the truck up to the museum. It's at Atwater, it's near Merced. And I saw that, and I'm holding my breath, and I'm thinking, dear God, the tail is going to hit the bridge. And praise the Lord, it did not. But it was nerve-wracking to watch. But I thought that was quite a picture.
Yes.
Because it really does look like it's. And isn't this where the B-17 is off on the right? On the right, yeah.
Is it still up there? Is it still?
Yes.
I think the B-17.
Yes, it is,
Yeah.
and they also have a Phantom jet out there too.
That's right. They've got an F4 with it. Yeah. Excellent. And this one's going to a museum back east, but there's the J-79 and all the other parts and pieces and stuff. And that's the way that one went. And I don't think the bed was wood, so the tail wouldn't come up. But that was a problem.
Snap roll.
I thought we'd just do a roll. Go ahead. And next one. Al's putting the J-79 in his F-104. He never did fly it, thank God. Have anyone ever read the -1? Well, you have. Of an F-104. Every other line says eject. in red letters. If this happens, eject. No! But, J79, beautiful engine, fabulous. Same engine as in the F4. They have two of them. Next. Mr. GE sitting here, he knows that. That's after he put the tail cone over the engine, and that's his F100C that Dick always wanted to fly. We ran the engine on that, and then the Charles Nichols at the Yanks Air Museum bought that F100 and one of Al's F86s. So, and that particular F104 went up to, was it Oregon?
Yeah.
And you traded it for the S2 Tracker. Anyway, the S2 Tracker was a flyer. Next, Merle, Maine. Merle,
Yeah.
Maine Museum. Here we are in Kwajalein. This is when they had a deal. They had to get so many airplanes for the colonel at the Air Force Museum in Dayton. And the deal was we had to go retrieve 7 C-7 Caribou in Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands. Kwaj is the lower part of the necklace because the atoll goes all the way around. The very top is Roy Namur. The Marines took Roy in 2 days in World War II. The Army took Kwaj in 4 days. So this is an Army base. And it is now called the Ronald Reagan Missile Range. That's where the missiles go from Vandenberg. When they fire missiles at Vandenberg, they go out here and they land in the lagoon.
Yeah, fortunately, they haven't hit the island yet.
Yes, and the scientists that are here then have to go out in the lagoon and retrieve all the pieces. And they were using caribou to fly the scientists. Well, they didn't like those big smoky ground engines. Next slide. And who likes big smoky ground engines? I do. But here we are, Kwajalein Missile Range. It's Buckholz Army Airfield. And next slide. There's the caribou. And it said Kwajalein. And what great, next slide. What great guys. And next slide. I think that was Daryl. This is Daryl here. Oh, he's got some 60 weight on him. And there's Al. You can't get that out. You know, I can get a lot. I'm pretty good at laundry. But 60 weight oil, forget it. I do not know how to get that out. But there they are working on the R2000 engine. And tell them what you had to do to the engine. We had to change all the flap hinges because they were corroded. It rains every day, horizontal rain, because the wind blows all the time.
The corrosion there is just horrible because of that. And there was one that Kathy likes cats. There was one cat there, and he just like a porcupine. All his fur was
Covered in
was
salt.
the salt that was blowing from there. And
You go to touch him and
anyway,
it
it's
was,
really funny.
yeah.
But these caribou had only been down, I mean, out of service for the shortest one maybe 6 months, and the longest maybe a year and a half. So, but the ones that were there for a year and a half, they have extensive flaps on the caribou, and the right at the top, the hinges are just gone. So, but luckily when we made the trade for these things, we got all the parts that had been stored there at Kwajalein, and so we're able to replace all that stuff. But anyway, that they just looked gorgeous inside them, where they'd been prepared to stay over there. But they anyway, we were lucky to get them. But there's the airplanes I think that we traded for this were the one Fokker D7
right.
and a Fokker R1 triplane, but it was a built, I mean, it was a replica.
The D7 was
But
the
the
real
D7
deal.
was the real thing, and
Got it from, who's that guy in New York?
Cole Palin.
Cole Palin, that's right. Yeah, got it from
Well, it turns out when it's kind of funny that, so it was my job to call, see if we could buy the D7 to include in this trade, and so Cole Palin's wife picked up the phone, and I introduced myself and said, we're interested in buying the D7, and she said, well, I'm sure Cole doesn't want to sell it, and I said, well, we're willing to pay a substantial amount for it, and she said, well, and I said, 200,000.
250.
And she said, well, that is substantial.
At that time, that was substantial, now it's, yeah.
But anyway, we got it.
And the other was a Ryan ST, wasn't it?
Yeah, so there's the Fokker D7, the Ryan ST, and the Fokker 1, the replica, and there's another one.
Yeah, but they were in the museum, we went back there and saw them, so it was
Yeah.
kinda cool.
They, at that time, the guy that was the curator of the Air Force Museum was really a forward-thinking guy, and he wasn't afraid to allow somebody to make a profit if you made a trade with him. And he'd have a list of ones that he's looking
He had a
for.
wish list.
And it might have a 0 or any number of very anxious airplanes that he wants, and we never tried to compete with some of those, but he had a lot of things at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base that were set aside for trades. And so if you were kind of in that business, you could do okay. So anyway, but that's how we got these airplanes at Quad.
But then you had to fly them home, next slide. It's beautiful there. You know, I thought it was humid in Florida until I got to Quad Lake. You couldn't breathe, but it was like another world. And next slide. It rained all the time, and see our fancy N number on there. And you just work in the rain because it's warm. And they save the rainwater off the runway, and that's the water then that they drink. So it's important that we not get anything on the ramp. Next slide. That's one of the pilots, I think that was Jan Riefenberg, and maybe 10 or 15 years ago, he was a firebomber pilot at Fox Field. He wrote an article called Herding the Caribou Across the Pacific. And that's sort of what we did. Next slide. You can't see it there, but it is raining, horizontal rain, as he walks across the top of that cowling. Next slide. Isn't that cool, the way the cowling opens up to get to that engine? It peels back like a banana. I'm sorry you can't see that.
Yeah, that's right.
But, yeah, it is really neat. Next slide. These are incoming missiles. Huh, this was launched from Vandenberg. We got to see it twice. Stand there and know that you're gonna live after a test of atomic warheads coming in from Vandenberg. 26 minutes it took them to go, what, 5,000 miles? These airplanes would take off from Quad and then fly to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to Oakland. And one time, because of the trade winds, they had to go to Midway first, then Hawaii, then to Oakland. And it's kind of a big deal, okay? Number one, we used avgas and not jet fuel, so they had to change. So we had to pay to have them change the fuel. But the big thing is you have to pay to have them go out and get all the Goonie birds off the runway. And
Real good birds.
that's, yeah, they're just birds that like to be on the runway. And I don't know how they shoo them off. No, I don't know what they do to get them off the runway, but
Taxi clear the
it's
runway.
still that way. I guess the Goonie birds are still there. I'd like to see them, but anyway, next slide shows coming in.
Oh,
The one that we saw, they call it MIRVing. I don't know what that stands for, M-E-R-V, but it's multiple something. Breaking apart.
Reentry vehicle part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And but there were 10, and it was kind of low on the horizon, and you could see it going like this, and one went straight down. But they had a target of the helipad on one of the islands. It wasn't Mac, it was one of the other islands up the chain. And they missed and got the powerhouse. And who did we talk to recently who said that was my powerhouse? What, is he here? He flew Hueys and, no, he's not here. But anyway, he was stationed at Quadge and he was telling us about that.
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting about that, those things are very accurate. You know, when they get there, they're gonna go pretty close to where they plan. And this powerhouse, this guy we just met a few
Yeah.
days ago was assigned there. And anyway, so now they are gonna try to hit, they had a helipad maybe 100 yards from the powerhouse.
Just
And the powerhouse is just, it's got 3 Caterpillar engines inside a tin building. But anyway, when the thing came in, you know, it was designed to go to that pad, to that helipad. But anyway, it hit the powerhouse just dead center, and of course there's
destroyed.
no explosive, but it's coming in so fast that it just shattered that, and the building blew, let the roof off. And
We
everything.
flew over it and there was just a hole there.
But anyway, the point I was going to make is that those crazy things go pretty damn close to where they intended.
Yeah,
Wonder how much you paid to get a new powerhouse.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
a pretty big deal
One
to
thing,
get
they
it.
didn't want any pictures taken of it, and it
And
turned
of
out.
course I took one. I didn't bring it.
Maybe Saddam Hussein was in the powerhouse.
Go ahead, next slide. There they are, all lined up. There's our 5. And it was always scary. I remember when it'd take off, you know, you'd say a prayer and hope it'd last and you'd get where he was going, and you always hated it when they came back. It's like, oh my God, what happened? But somehow we got 5 of them to Mojave. Anyway, next slide. There she is in here. It's a de Havilland DHC-4. So it's a Canadian airplane. But this ramp opens up in the back. And I think I have quite a lengthy thing about the sheriff's. Let's see.
They did in Vietnam.
We hired extra mechanics, spent 5 weeks at Kwajalein preparing the airplanes for flight. Pilots familiar with the aircraft and the route, it's important. And we hired a navigator, and they used the celestial navigation, you know, took sun sights and whatnot. This is before GPS. It's so much easier to cross the oceans now. When he brought the PPY over from Spain, there were 5 GPSs in the airplane. Portable, but they were all working. Let's see, these aircraft were equipped with extra fuel tanks, extra barrels of oil that could be pumped into the engine during flight, because a round engine uses a lot of oil. And now, it's hand cranked in. So, we had special tanks, and I didn't have a picture of it, I do at home, but we had them made by a guy up in Oakland. His name was Victor Cross. And it was funny, he had a desk, and he had this cotton cloud over him, and it was painted black. He always had a dark cloud over him. It was funny. He said he wanted to die tanking an airplane, but he loved his work. The first team, we tried to send them out in 2 at a time. Of course, because there were 5, one had to go alone. But on the first leg of the trip, they went to Midway because of the headwinds, and the flight took 10.5 hours. They headed then for Honolulu the next day and took 8.5 hours. And then the flight from Oakland to Hawaii took 11.5 hours. So that was probably the longest flight. He was a crew member on Ship 3. They flew from Quadge to Honolulu in 15 hours, 45 minutes. The 3 pilots traded off navigation and pilot duties. One would try to sleep, and then Al flew back to Kwajalein the next day on Air Micronesia. And then another pilot joined the crew in Hawaii for the flight to Oakland. I hesitate to tell you. In the Marshall Islands, the way the things are run by the Marshallese is it's the women that kind of own the property and are in charge of things. But King Kabua, I believe it was, somebody had died and they were sending the body back to, or a coffin or something. So our tanks didn't get on our mic. Well, we were geared up to go, and we're paying pilots out of our own pocket, and we're ready to go, and no tanks. So we scrounged up, I don't know how many 50-gallon drums, and we made fish habitats for them as they were emptied. We'd take the bung out, and it would go overboard. And they arrived then at Hawaii with no visible means of extra tanking. Thank God nobody asked any questions.
Right.
But anyway, I guess the tanks were in Hawaii then, and for the flight to Oakland. But next slide. Well, the base at Kwajalein is absolutely gorgeous, and I've got to tell you, we stayed in this place called the Kwaj Lodge. And they built it, and they used seawater with the cement. And when you use seawater and put rebar in it, it eats it up. And so it wasn't long after we had left, they had to take the building down and do it another way. Apparently there is some cement now that they have developed or something where they can use the seawater. The swimming pool at Quad was seawater, of course. I mean, you're an island for crying out loud. But it was lovely. The park is where they held church service. And you'd go there and, you know, beautiful palm trees and everything, and it was just all outside. And so warm. And while they were working on the airplanes, I was enjoying the critters and the tide pools and the little starfish and things that you could find. But there were coconut crabs. Have you ever seen a coconut crab? Al said he was working on the airplane one time, and this crab comes out from behind the landing gear. It's like they have castanets, you know, and he thought the thing was going to eat him up. They're pretty good size. He's just clicking his claws. But they can actually go up a tree and break the coconuts. You tried to break a coconut? Good Lord. So what they would do, they put metal, aluminum around so he couldn't get traction to get up and get the coconuts. We flew to another island when we had gone out there at first, and we went to Majuro, and then we went out to Malolap, and the little native children could climb up those trees lickety-scoot. They were just amazing. And they went up and brought me a coconut, and somehow they were able to open it to where you could drink the coconut milk. And the native women put it in baby bottles. It's really healthy coconut milk. I mean, you pay a lot of money for it here. But I mean, we watched them, a farmer, they had hogs, because they eat a lot of pig meat. And they, he had a spike, and he would break the coconuts and throw them to the pigs, and they'd just eat them up. But it is one of nature's perfect foods, like bananas. That's just a side issue. HU-16 in Grand Turk. Now we're clear across on the other side of the world. We called her the Bogota cucumber. I'm sure it was a drug runner. And we found it in Trader Plane, and it was going for bid, or you got it for something like $16,000, which sounds like a really good deal until you get there. There's no APU. There's a lot of things wrong with it. What are we doing here? But he had to find a guy that knew where the APU was and pay certain people to get the APU back. Next slide. While we were right, Al really gets into his work, by the way. He's up there on that 1820?
Yeah.
1820.
Those were white pants?
And
yeah.
always
Oh.
white cords. You always wore white
Yeah.
cords. Do you think I ever got them clean? No. Again, that's 60 weight.
What's Al really doing there?
He's putting some oil in something up there.
Looks like a can of Budweiser.
Got up there 'cause I haven't clue. He probably climbed up on the paneling and back down again.
The airplane, I mean, the propeller on those rigs has so much oil, and so you kind of
Oh, it's
top
prop
up the
oil.
oil. And,
Because you can back it up, taxi.
well, yeah, it's
Taxi
got a,
and then
got a reversible prop, but instead of using the engine oil to do it, which is mostly done in.
Okay, next slide. This is the cockpit of a HU-16 Albatross Grumman airplane. And you'll notice the throttles and everything are up overhead. Great for hitting your head on. He always had scabs on his head. But this lifts up and, yeah, had some experiences in Albatrosses. Next slide. That's bare bones, strictly military.
Looks
No.
pretty good from here.
He thinks it's beautiful. Next slide. That was a transportation in Grand Turk, either that or walking. And mosquitoes, oh my God. First thing, he gets there and there was a wasp nest up in the landing gear. And you don't want to really mess with those, so we asked the guy at their kind of hardware, grocery, whatever store, and he suggested using Hot Shot, you know, it's, oh, wow, goes a 20-foot stream. So he got rid of the wasp, and when I got there, I saw this black cloud. I said, how come that cloud's so low? And he says, well, those are mosquitoes. Oh my God. They just eat me alive, they don't touch him. But it's because I'm so sweet. Probably is. This is a C-97. While we were running the right engine really hard, it blew up. So we had to come home and get another engine. We went to Aircraft Cylinder and got a rebuilt engine, sent it to Florida, and I saw, this is the airplane they were gonna send it to Grand Turk on. I've always wanted to ride in something with 4360s. It had 4360s. So I went up to the pilot and I said, is there any way we can get on that airplane too? He said, I'll take you as freight. I better go get my husband. I don't think I want to go as freight with this guy. Anyway, so I got out and I said, they'll take us as freight. So we got on the scale, paid how much it would be to ship us over there. And we went with the engine in the C-97. And have you been in a C-97? It's like flying this room. You're there and way out here are the windshields and stuff. It's amazing. And you want smoke when those engines start. There's really smoke. It's fabulous. But we were flying 500 feet over the water, and the water is so clear. You can see clear to the bottom, and we saw manta rays flying in the water. It was beautiful. I didn't have a good camera then. This was back during the days of not digital cameras or iPhones. It was film. But anyway, next slide. We brought her home, and his son Dora put a paint job on, and then she finally looked happy, and she wasn't the Bogota cucumber anymore. I've got to tell you, when they went to Florida, though, they landed at Panama City, was it? Where you had to go through customs?
Fort Pierce.
Oh, Fort Pierce, that's right. And this gal gets in there, and she was sure they were drug runners, but they weren't. I'm not so sure about the C-97 drivers, though. But anyway, that's a good story. They finally did make it through customs, and then you went to Panama City, and that's where I met you.
Yeah.
But the hydraulics failed. They lost hydraulics and couldn't taxi anymore. And so this guy says, why have they stopped on the runway? And I said, I think they probably lost hydraulics. You're gonna have to tow them off. And so they did. What
One thing
drove?
goes, ex-military like this, they have so many backup systems that you have a pretty good chance of saving yourself when some of the things fail like that. But when we landed at Panama City, I was telling my son to pump it, and we have pumped the gear down, and it put a while because the gear is pretty big on that thing, and so it might take 5 minutes of pumping to get the gear down. But anyway, got it down, and we landed, and so he's still pumping, and I've been putting some pressure on the brakes, you know. And pretty soon we're just skidding down the runway, and the door stopped, don't pump anymore. But anyway, the point is that with backup like that, you can get away with quite a bit of stuff.
But how, once we got it off the runway, what did you need to do to fix that?
Oh, there was a hose that had blown up in the wing, and
Yeah.
replaced that hose, and we were ready to go.
See, when you're doing this sort of stuff, you're not only the pilot, you're the mechanic, and you may have to engineer something else to put on there, and thank God it's an experimental airplane, so you can go down to local hardware and get whatever you need and stick on there. But we landed at different places throughout the country, and I remember he pulled in one place and it was so tight that you couldn't turn around, so he just put it in reverse and backed it up, and it was pretty neat. But I was kind of happy to get home to Mojave. Next slide. And I guess both engines are running there. Next slide. There she is in the air. This is the one we're cleaning it out, and it has bilge pumps, 7 of them. And we had a couple of cats that would run up and down the ladder and get on the seats, and you had the doors that open up on the top, and they'd climb out on the engines, and those guys were working on the engines. Next slide. And they have a wonderful sound. Have you heard that albatross that comes into the National Test Pilot School? It's like 2 T-28s flying in formation, 1820s. Next slide. I like that airplane, obviously.
Yeah.
I like the paint job. I love those colors. They're happy colors. Next slide. Oh, more HU-16s. He's only had 6 of them. We went to Mena, Arkansas. I forget, did we buy this one or trade for this one?
We bought that one.
Oh. Well, Mena, Arkansas was the place where they would fly the C-7 Caribou from Kwajalein to Mena for their IRAN checks. What's IRAN stand for?
Inspect repairs necessary.
As necessary, okay. Well, the airplanes would make it fine to Mena, and where they had trouble was flying back to Kwajalein after they had been worked on. And I just feel like if it's not broke, don't fix it. But everything is time life and whatnot in the military, and they have certain requirements. So, next slide. I don't think you, well, yeah, you would. He'd still do that today. I wouldn't. Next slide. This is the first albatross he ever had. Was this Wally McDonald?
This one belonged to Wally McDonald and then went to Asher. But it had been tied down by the new tower, and
Right.
There was a T6 down there that had the engine taken off. And it was tied down good too, but anyway, the wind came up and picked
The
that
wind came up in
T6,
Mojave.
picked the T6 up and threw it over the top of the
Yeah.
albatross, poked a hole in the other side, and
Yeah.
Oh my God.
anyway, so it got it pretty reasonable, but it sure needed some agricultural.
This is
work.
Wally Kelly. Anybody remember him? No. That's an old picture. Probably 84 or 85. Yes. I know, it seems like yesterday, doesn't it? I have to, my God, that was, yeah. And, we did some water landings at Lake Tahoe with, what's his name? The airplane. This guy, what is his name?
Why would you ask me such a thing?
I'm sorry. Anyway, he's this kind of guy, he races T6s too at Reno. But if it's your airplane, it's a piece of junk. But once he buys it from you, it's the queen of the fleet. And he doubles the price. And damn, if he doesn't get it, it's really disgusting. Oh, I almost had the name. Anyway, next slide. You can tell I'm old, I'm calling them slides. I still have a slide projector. Okay, this is one of the C-123s. They make a little smoke when you start them. That's a 2800. And then it has J-85 jets on it as well. And the J-85s will run on the avgas. Not as long and well as they do on jet fuel, but in the essence of just keeping all one fuel, the military would run them on. Al is repairing a jet door actuator in less than laboratory conditions. He just spreads everything out on the ground and goes to it. But the jet engines on the C-123 had doors that would open up and then you could start them. And this was the jet door actuator. And it wasn't working, so he was fixing it. And that's one of the last C-123s we had, and it didn't have the J-85s on it. As a matter of fact, that's the second time we owned it. We got that from a guy in Minnesota, and he owned it with Jack Watson. And used it in some movie work around here. What was that show that Jennifer Garner was in?
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember. But anyway, she came out here and filmed something, and they used, she was doing something to a bad guy and threw him into the prop as it was running. Not really, but that's what it was supposed to look like. I can't remember that show. Kids watched it, but I don't. Anyway, this is the B-29 T-Bird expedition. Daryl Greenmeyer called Al and asked him if he'd be the co-pilot. This was the third year that Daryl had worked on it. It was forced to land in 1947. And let's see. The picture that you'll see was taken in '93 when the recovery efforts first started. And then it was sitting in a mile-long lake in northern Greenland. We went there in 1995. Next slide. And this is it, just sitting there. Now, the deal is when they go up there, the lake is frozen. So, she is there, she landed gear up. And I have video that's not very good, but Daryl took it and somehow I ended up with it, and it's on VHS, and somehow I have to convert it to, digitize it. But it shows the guys, two guys with a pole with a jack in between them, walking out to go underneath, to jack the airplane up so they can lower the gear so they can pull it out. And at the time they went up, it was not frozen, it was still a lake. But it's cold up there, really cold. This lake is, I believe, 173 miles north and a little east of Thule Air Base. Next slide. This is, first thing I did when I went there is I headed to the library because there was no museum, but I wanted to research what happened to the airplane, who was on it, that sort of stuff means something to me. And there was a young man aboard this airplane. It was a U.S. Army Air Corps B-29 Super Fortress from Fairbanks, Alaska, carrying the name T-Bird. Crash landed February 21st, 1947. An Arctic storm had engulfed the aircraft, and they were with the 46th 72nd Reconnaissance Squadron, making, it made navigation impossible. Because again, they use celestial navigation. When you're in a cloud,
Smokes of them, yeah.
you can't see anything. So the 11 crew members survived the crash, but were stranded for 3 or 4 days in the cold. Rations were dropped to them, and on February 24th, a 22-year-old Army Air Corps lieutenant in a Douglas C-54, which is a DC-4, made the daring rescue. He used JATO bottles to get the huge 4-engine aircraft airborne before hitting the tall, like, ice, they call them hummocks, but it was, speed bumps. The ice would freeze as it's, the kind of waves, because you think the wind blows here. When we landed at Thule, I saw all these fuel tanks and they were oil canned in. I said, what the heck hit those fuel tanks? And they said, oh, we had a wind. And I said, I'm from Mojave, I understand wind. How fast was it? 208 miles an hour. Now that's a wind. Yeah, I said, we reach 100 or so, but never 2. So yeah, they beat us there. But this was a recon squadron, and there's a book called World in Peril by Ken White, and it tells the story of the initial response to the Cold War, of the DEW line, and it includes the crash of the Keybird. One of the 11-man crew was Lieutenant Howard Adams of New York, and he sent his mother a letter, and he detailed this description of his experience. They took off from Ladd Field in Fairbanks on a clear afternoon, February 20th, 1947. They flew over uncharted Arctic, flew all night on their mission, and at 1:30, they flew into the storm and lost their way. There was no GPS. They climbed to 25,000 feet, hoping to get out of the storm, but after flying for 4 hours, their radar picked up a strange coastline. So they realized they were really lost. Now, as Dick can tell you, when you're that far north, the magnetic compass just goes around, around, and around. And at that time of year, on the horizon, the sun doesn't come up. It just goes around. And there's just a glow. When we were in Greenland, I could tell what time it was by where the sun was. But it never came up. It was just there, and there, and there. And it was light all the time. So, but anyway, they couldn't get a fix on any star because the sun never really came up over the horizon, and the glow blocked the view of the stars. So they were hopelessly lost, the gas was running low, and they had to find a place to crash land. And he said, I prayed like I never prayed before, he wrote. When we hit the lake, there was hardly a jar, and since the snow was only about 10 inches deep, we skidded across the lake as if we were on ice skates. Now, he grew up in New York, so he knew about ice skating. Mom, I don't know how I could ever explain how I felt during the time we were lost. I didn't know if I'd ever get back home. But I know now that God answers prayers, and only through Him was I saved. After the crash, everyone got out immediately because they were afraid of fire. And there was no fire, so we prepared for the night. We burned oil from the engines for fuel, and when it was completely dark, the stars came into view. The navigator was able to get our position. And everything freezes in the Arctic, so they had to build a fire under the little gasoline engine, and we are assuming that he meant the APU that's in the back of the plane. And then they started the radio. They had to get the APU running to be able to get the electric working to use the radio in the airplane. And he said it was wonderful to send a message once on the radio, and we got a message, return message, immediately from one of the ships that was out looking for us. And of course he calls the airplanes ships. It wasn't a boat. Even though that night the ship couldn't locate us, we knew more were on the way, and the next morning about 10:30 we guided a ship into us. Mom, there was a big lump in my throat when they found us and dropped supplies. That night we rested easier. On the third morning, Lieutenant packs of rabbits, foxes, wolves, and muskox. But there were no shrubbery, no trees, a little green grass at places under the snow. Mom, it was so cold the guns wouldn't fire. I sure would have hated to meet up with a polar bear, but we didn't see any tracks. The next day, Monday morning, we all prepared for the C-54 that was coming. It came at 10 a.m. and I was never so happy to get on anything in my life. We landed in Thule and they fed us like kings. Then we flew to Massachusetts and I slept the whole flight. He was able to call his girlfriend and she drove up to see him. And he said, Mom, I can't write everything that happened. It would take a book. And the worst thing was the fact that I shivered so much and I was getting weak. Everyone was. Any work in that severe temperature was extremely tiring. Just carrying the supplies that were dropped made us tired. Everyone takes so much for granted in life, yet we believe we owe so much for so many things. Not one thing went bad for us, well, except for having it crash. But if only one thing had gone wrong, we'd still be on that ice cap. It was God and that radio that saved us all. Someday I'll see you again and I'll tell you all the little details that I've missed. It's extremely hazardous, Arctic flying. Nothing is ever said about our squadron because our missions are all secret. But someday everyone will see the work we've done and then I can tell you everything. And it's true. And that still happens today. You know, loose lips sink ships, even now. So that's what all of this is. His mother took the article to the local paper and had it printed. So I thought it was significant that that was recorded, and it meant something to me, being a mom. And it was nice that he could write that to his mother. Next slide.
It has to be awful cold.
Oh.
If it's cold for someone who launched from Fairbanks.
It was 55 below. 55 below it went one night. I mean, it's beyond cold. It's unbelievably cold. And here we are at Thule Air Base, and it's at 68 degrees north. That's way up there. And the Keybird was even further north. That's me with Vernon Rich, and I can't remember who that guy is. That's the base commander. And I can't remember his name, but like I say, it was a beautiful base. But it's all, next slide. There's Daryl. He's showing where the Keybird is on the map of Greenland. And I've got to tell you that they tried building hangars and putting cement down. And cement, if you don't know, has its own heat. It carries its own heat. And it melted the ice, and the floor just was a bowl. Just a complete bowl. And worthless. They couldn't use it. So when they built buildings, they put everything on stilts. And it was just like a cracker box building, and I'll show you a picture of it. But they heated everything with steam heat. And the steam pipes went up and over the tops of roads, because you couldn't lay anything on the muskeg, because it would just sit down and melt. So it's like being on another planet. Next slide. See, there's the steam pipes that go up and over the road. And the buildings, you'd go in and you'd go, my God, it's hot in here. So, but there was no way to control the heat. It was either really hot or really cold. So you go in and it's really hot, so you open a window. But that's what they did. Next slide, I'll show you the building. Here's the building we were in, and it's all elevated, and some of these windows are open. It's not very fancy. And inside you had a living room area, a dining area, and a kitchen in the middle. That's where I spent all my time. And then bedrooms and bathrooms at each end, and I think there were 14 bedrooms. I was the only girl up there, 14 guys, but I grew up with brothers, so it was like being at home. But I do love to cook. And like this young man was saying, he shivered so much, and you need calories when you are in cold places like this. So I fixed full meals. I cooked a turkey and made the dressing, and I made pecan pie and pumpkin pie and just something with lots of calories. I sent lasagna up there, and I remember there was a twin otter that would fly up, and I'd go to the PX and I got some fresh fruit, and I sent a pear up for Al. And after being up there for so many days, and the guy they had doing the cooking was not exactly a chef, but they used one of those giant igloo ice chests to keep the food hot, because it's just an insulator. It's like, I love those jokes about the blondes. Well, but how does the thermos keep it cold? Anyway, it'll keep it cold or it'll keep it hot. Because I know when my son does cooking for our barbecues, he takes the ice chest, lines it with foil, pulls that tri-tip off, before it's done, throws it in there, closes the lid, it continues to cook. And so I sent this turkey dinner up to him. I'll show you a video in a little bit. And they did enjoy that. But Daryl was a slave driver. He wouldn't let him stop and eat when the food was hot, so it got cold. Next slide.
They didn't left you off the base to cook that much.
Yeah, yeah.
You might still be up there.
I might still be up there. I've got it, this is after she was pulled out of the lake, and you can see that it says Keybird on the side. And Daryl had taken a caribou up there, again, a beautiful C7 caribou, and he hauled a tractor up there in the caribou. He hauled, these are 3350 engines, so they're big, they're heavy. He hauled the 4 engines, I think probably only 1 or 2 at a time, and the 4 props, and they changed all 4 engines and all 4 props. And his mechanic got sick, and they had to send him to Canada, and he died because he had something wrong inside with his spleen. But what a great guy, and Daryl just felt awful. It felt like he killed his friends, but he had something wrong with him, but he drove himself and wasn't about to stop. And I don't know anybody like that. Anyway, next slide. I've got to tell you, I'll tell you about this Herman Nelson and why they used it, this machine here with this hose going up to the engine.
Well, just that those engines, naturally as cold as they are, either the oil is just absolutely won't flow. But that Herman Nelson has a pretty good fire going inside of it and blowing on it until we could get one engine warm enough to fire it up and then keep it going. But of course the fuel is a big issue, so can't be, so when we finally got all 4 of them running, and taxied the thing out on the lake, when they landed it with the gear up and it had that snow on it, as he said to his mother there, the thing just skidded right along. But when we were there taking off, the wind had blown all that snow away. And they were just like, it was terrible. I mean, when it just bounced something awful. And we got it up to about probably 40, and almost where the nose gear was pitching up just a little bit, but a guy was in the back that, and the APU had caught fire back there. And so he was hollering fire on the intercom, and we stopped immediately and jumped out there, and it was just, it didn't look like there was any fire from the outside, but when we opened up a door just in front of the tail assembly, and it was just all involved in there, and it wasn't more than 5 minutes, and that entire aft end fell on the water. It just was the damnedest thing.
He was told to shut the APU off once they had all 4 engines running, and he didn't do it. But you know, you don't know, maybe they'd have gotten in the air and not made it. So it may have been a blessing in disguise for their lives, but it killed the airplane, and that was sad. I wanted to tell you about each of these engines. Each engine had its own mechanic, and they painted the name of their girlfriend or the wife on it. So there's Ida, Norma, and the next one, number 3, was Polly, and number 4 was Pat. I thought, I've never seen that before on an airplane. I've seen nose art, but I've never seen names on engine cowlings. That's very different, and I thought it was kind of unique. Next one. That's the Twin Otter that would take the food and fuel and supplies out, and that's Al. Maybe I'll play you that video if I can get to it.
Al, was the APU the original, or
The props in the engines were, they were, as the car burned down, they were into the snow.
Say no, Kathy.
But they just fly back there and pick them up.
Anyway, he's going to show you the gear here. I'm sorry the video isn't very good quality, but there's icicles hanging all over. Can't see them very well. My photographer is not experienced. But he's going to show you some technical pictures of the landing gear. It is massive. The rivets are beautiful, and it was. Daryl said
Above
one.
the water level, our sun is pretty clean.
Yeah, above the water level. But it's cold. And the air is so clear. And he was always going to walk over to a mountain. He thought it was really close, but it was miles away. There they are. You can hear the wind. It's like talking on the phone in Mojave. Now this is back at Thule, and that's the Caribou. And I think they had, something was wrong with the right engine. You'll notice the right engine's feathered. Or the starboard engine. But the truck we were driving was, I think, a diesel. So it's rattling. But there's some of those pipes, the steam pipes. It is like being on another planet. It was cold. There's some little Arctic hares. Of course, I take pictures of that. I love critters.
Now, was there a story about the bulldozer that he took up there?
Oh, yeah.
The bulldozer? Story about that?
Well, when the and just, they could barely get off. So he got the nose real high and they struggled, and get up there, and the guy who was flying was telling Daryl, we better go back, and it's safer to try and land up here with this thing than it would be to try and fly it back. And so they landed there at the site, and the nose gear pitched in, and it's a long nose gear. You'd think it would have torn that thing right off, but it didn't. It just drove it down into the muskeg, so the tractor is now there, and it's in one piece, and back it out of that thing, and ready to go. And so we used it all around the airplane to clear out, to find the stuff from the year before. But anyway, and that little tractor was great. But that the Caribou now with that nose way down, and there's some pictures of it. It's laying right on top, but the gear is down there 4 or 5 feet. And so anyway, started digging around here, and it is, it is cold and all that jazz, and dig around there and get that up to where the nose gear is up and pull it a little bit with the tractor to a flat place. And then I'll be darned, but then the gear was okay. But of course the tires had lost their air, so didn't have any compressor. But by putting propane in there, you could get probably 15 pounds of pressure at that temperature.
Is the tractor still up there at the site?
Yeah, but it's down about 15 feet. When, after all this stuff happened, I mean, after the airplane burned up, we took all of our supplies and the tractor and the Herman Nelson, everything that we had there, and put it under the back of under the wing a little bit, and sitting up to, so that when the thaw came, it would hopefully go down and be out of sight. But it didn't quite get out of sight. And,
But they had an expedition go up and then clear everything out.
yeah, one of the partners on that deal, the Danish government insisted that they go back and clean it up. And so, big time money for him. They had to go back and get the Twin Otters again to go out there and haul the guys around. It was kind of a disaster in the end, but interesting expedition for us. And but the first year they were up there, well, we have a video of that, but and they're in the Huey, and they're going from Thule in the Huey all the way up there. It's a long flight in the Huey. And but anyway, so they get there and establish some supplies, and they have these jacks, and they're carrying them out, and they've got waders on, but man, it's cold, and they're carrying that jack out there, and the gear on the B-29 is electric, so they just jack up one side and get it up there, and then they had the battery and a little generator, and put that gear down, and then waller around in the water, and come around here and put the jack in the other side, and then now we had the thing up level, and the two main gears down, and the nose gear is still down in the water. And but anyway, so the guy one of the guys, a friend of Daryl's, and he was a good driver on the Huey, so he'd pick it, the net, put all the heavy stuff in the net, and he'd pick it up and take it back here and drop it on the horizontal. And they did that 2 or 3 times until they had enough on there, and then he just went down, and the nose gears up out of the water, and put it down, and then, anyway, it's pretty
I
historic.
wish I could show you that video. The only way I got this one, I used my little camera, and I sat there in front of the TV. And I know there's a better way to do it, but I'm not very tech savvy. But in this video, as soon as Daryl got there, even with the prop all bent back, he gets in the cockpit, and he said it was like stepping back in time, and the smell of the oils and everything is still there. And he said he went up in the cockpit, and just for the heck of it, I'm gonna try to start this thing. And I'll be darned, number one was firing, and you could see the puffs of smoke coming out, and he said it was the most god-awful screeching and squalling, of course, but it started to go. I mean, you could see the smoke coming out, and the prop, even all bent back, was turning. And so it was pretty, guys are like kids. They just can't leave things well enough alone. They gotta see if, let's see if this works. So, but it is a, same quality video as this, but still, it's the only thing we have. And so I want to preserve it. Jason here at the airport said he has an old converter that would go directly from the VHS to a computer. So I'm going to take him those old VHS tapes and say, don't lose them. Right. Next slide. There's the tractor that Dick was talking about. And it's a little John Deere, I think. Just a little, but it just wasn't heavy enough to knock the tops off those ice humps, whatever you would call them. And
And when they had Daryl had hauled a BG scraper up at the same time, thinking this tractor would pull out and make a real nice smooth runway, but that BG scraper just bounced over and was done. And, you know, the wind blows so much, it just makes a very low ocean out of that, blowing the snow.
One night it blew all their tents away, and they had to get up in the airplane. He came home with, you know, little frostbite in his fingers. And because you can't work on a, you know, do mechanic things with gloves on. So they'd have gloves with the fingers exposed. And I found the other day a little pin, and I thought, gee, what is that? And I took it to him, and he says, oh, you know, that must have been in my coat. It was a pin for the cowling on the B-29. So I thought, something else to go in the museum. Next slide. This is what Daryl's daughter had sent with Daryl. I don't know if she had a premonition or whatever, but she loved her daddy. And she loved this quote by Teddy Roosevelt. Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat. And that's the truth. They, I guess, were defeated, but they tried. So, next slide.
Al, you and Daryl were in the cockpit, and you were taxiing when the fire started.
Yeah.
And then they were telling me the story that they found they were on fire and he couldn't get the seatbelt open.
On Daryl.
Oh, Daryl.
So,
tell about that.
Yeah, to get out of the thing, you know, there's kind of a chute down underneath. And,
yeah, tell about
oh yeah, anyway, the access to the cockpit is a square chute, like, back a little ways from, so you get in there, climb up and walk a little bit forward to the, anyway, the guy starts yelling fire, and so we put the brakes on and I jumped up and went down through that chute, and I didn't think about Daryl. I mean, he could get up and get out too if he had to, but anyway, so I'm back here, where's the fire? And we opened that door, like I said, in front of the stabilizer, and the fire is terrible. But anyway, what I didn't know is the engineer, which has a position back about 8-10 feet from the pilot's and co-pilot's seats. Anyway, he's a great big fat guy, and but now Daryl's trying to get out, and he can't get that those military seat belts with that little lever like. Anyway, he couldn't get it, and this guy, the engineer's up there trying to help him, and he can't get it either. And but anyway, they're thrashing around, and finally found a crescent wrench, and couldn't be able to get that under there, and got Daryl out. And about that time, the fire was beginning to get kind of threatening up there in the front.
The B-29 has a tube that goes right down through the center of the fuselage that could be pressurized, and the fire was coming right through that tube. I have a friend here from the office of Congressman Kevin McCarthy, and he's got to go to another event. He wanted to say something. I'll let you introduce yourself. And
thank you very much. By the way, how fascinating has all of this been?
I didn't know
that there was you could take pictures before iPhones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I guess it's not a lens or a filter like you can do on Instagram. The world actually was that color back in the, what was it, 70s, 80s?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Aaron Falk. I am Congressman Kevin McCarthy's field representative for Mojave and the Greater Antelope Valley. I was talking with Kevin about this a couple of days ago. He's out here today touring the state with President Trump, looking at some of the fire damage. And, in fact, they might be landing at Point. You're not broadcasting this live, are you? You might be. I think they might be landing at Point Mugu here any minute, and then heading up through Malibu and possibly even Thousand Oaks to see that. But I don't want to get ahead of the schedule there. I talk to Kevin a couple of times a week, and every time Mojave comes up, the first thing he asks is, "How's Cathy Hansen doing?"
Oh, that's sweet.
Almost immediately followed by, "Also, Dick is texting me. It's in all caps. Can you please find out what's going on?"
Yes.
He's got a special place in his heart for you. He asked me to come here today, and we've got a certificate of congressional recognition for the Transportation Museum in honor of Plane Crazy Saturday.
Well, thank you so much.
Share.
Absolutely. Oh, this is wonderful. Well, tell Kevin I appreciate him so much. And I would love the president Trump to land here, but then nobody could fly home because it would be a TFR over. So we don't want that. Send me your picture. Thank you so much.
And I'm sorry that I can't stay. I'm going to get the cliff notes from him because this was fascinating.
No, well, yeah, anytime. I'm happy to share airplanes with you. Yes.
Absolutely. We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was it. Well, we'll jump from Greenland now. We're back home, and of course he's got to get a MiG-15. He didn't have just one; he had two. One's a BIS, single seat, and the other's a UTI, two-seat. But this one looks beautiful here, right? Mm-hmm. Next slide. This is the way it looked when we first got it. You know, people look at something like this and they think, what a pile of junk. Mm-hmm. Well, my husband is one of these guys, he sees this and he says, oh yeah, well you can do this and do that, and you know, in his mind he sees it like, and I said, why are you painting it red? He says, I said, you know, they didn't paint him that color. He says, it's my MiG now, I'll paint it whatever color I want. He doesn't care what the Russians paint it. So anyway, he painted his MiGs balloon red. But this is down at Chino, and next slide. That's, you know, the wings, and they have, did they have the fences on the wings? Yep. I think they did. Next slide. Yeah, the tail. Next slide. And there she is, all pretty. But it takes time. It's not just waving a magic wand over it. It's a lot of work, and it's nice when a person can be part pilot, part mechanic, part engineer, and that's what he does. He'll see something that other people see as dead, and he breathes new life into it. And he flew his MiG, and he actually liked the way it flew, though the stick is real tall. And he says the Russians, when they build something, it's hammer and tongs. It's nothing, no comfort, no creature comforts whatsoever. It is just practical, period. But it worked. And I think they had like a 30mm cannon. So, and the F-86 only had the 50mm machine gun. 37mm cannon. Oh, you're right. It wasn't a 20. It was, good God. Who'd want to get shot down with that? Next one. Oh, we also had a MiG-21, but I didn't show you that. The Grumman TBM Avenger, there was one at Hemet that had been a fire bomber. And so he decided we needed a TBM. Okay. We bought torpedo doors and a turret separately for the restoration. And it had a 2600 engine. He said it handled like a truck. Anyway, next slide. This is what she looked like down at Hemet in the fire bomber configuration. Next slide. That's starting up. And he was going to fly it home to Mojave. And I got to drive home again. But I looked at him after he took off, and all I could see was what appeared to be black smoke. No, it was oil. Go back to the oily one. Yeah, he's got. In these old airplanes, you have to wait and let everything warm up first. And Mr. Impatient taxied out a little too fast and took off too soon, and it blew the oil line and blew all over the windshield and all down the and he had to land it, not really being able to see. So some guy was there, and he did bounce a little. But he's looking out the side to land in an airplane he's never flown before. And he kind of bounced a little. And there, some guy went back to Van Nuys and was telling Matt Jackson, "You should have been there. There was some loony bastard taking off." Anyway, yeah. Well, anyway, Matt could hardly wait to tell us that story. Next slide. So we spent the night in beautiful downtown Hemet. But he did get her home the next day. We changed the oil line. And this is what then she looked like after, well, my son painted this airplane. Next slide. And that's the way it looked. Then we made a trade with John Marzullo at, yeah, at another museum. Well, anyway, she ended up in France in a museum because John then traded her for a Sky Raider, I think, or two possibly. But I was surprised when we were in England one time. I was looking through a magazine and I went, "Wow, I recognize that TBM," and it said it was in a museum in France. So, but I didn't fly in that. But come to find out, Des McCarthy, my flight instructor, flew these in the Navy in World War II and went into the ocean 3 times. Wow. Was shot down 3 times.
George H.W.
And I
Bush.
remember telling
Went down to one
him,
of
"Al has a TBM." He said, "You stay out of that
Those are that
airplane, they're
H.W. Bush.
dangerous." I said, "Nobody's shooting
Airplane
at
he was
us."
in when he was
Anyway, next slide. That's the turret. Somebody had refurbished it up in Washington, I believe. Or was it Oregon? Washington. And we drove up there and got it. Next slide. And I can't believe in these turrets, they have ashtrays. Who the hell would want to smoke when you're firing this? Anyway, we carried that home in my ranchero. And I was a little concerned about the gun because this is during the freeway shootings. So I made Al and his son cover it with a bedspread. But they couldn't cover up the gun, so it was sticking out. So people would come up behind us and they'd quick pass us. And I thought, oh dear, they think we're going to shoot them. Next slide. But we didn't. Anyway, we got into Huey's, that's our B model, and she's painted up for the movie JFK. And the way we got the B model was it belonged to Al Letcher first. And Al traded Al Letcher a piece of property way up in the mountains, a whole section, for this beautiful Huey. And the way Al got the Huey was it had belonged to the DEA, and they used to fly the border with it. So it was a border patrol helicopter. They didn't get shot down now. But anyway, it is a 1962 Huey, and it really did serve in Vietnam. Next. That's not our Cobra. We did have one. That belongs to, what's his name? Hera.
Mike Hera.
Mike Hera. I think he has something to do with hotels in Vegas or something. But that's our H model. And remember, Michelle,
Yes.
when we went out there? They were doing a ER TV show.
Yes.
Next slide. And Dale Dye was there. So there's Michelle and I with Dale Dye. And next slide. That's our front yard.
Yep.
It looks a little better than that now. I used to have a bobcat that slept in that bush. But everybody has a helipad in their front yard, don't they? Well, when Bert saw that, he wanted a helipad in his front yard, so we had, yeah. This is the movie shoot with Kevin LaRosa, and that's the clock tower building that was in Back to the Future. It's burned down since then. But when you know, we had to call, they wanted us to come in at a certain time, and I had to duck down so I wouldn't be in the camera shot. They had scattered all these leaves around so that when we landed, they'd be all over the place. After we landed, it shut down, they raked up all the leaves, put them in bags again because they have to shoot things over and over again for movie work. And it was for some TV show, I don't know what now. But that's one of our H models. Next. That's on the set in Arizona, Casa Grande, for the movie Three Kings. We had 3 machines on that movie, 3 H models. Next. And that's the crew with, what's his name? George. Yeah, George Clooney. He's nice to look at, but I don't like his politics. Yeah. But there's Ricky, I love Ricky, and Mike Patlin, the aerial coordinator, and Mike's brother-in-law. We call him Louis Kablooey, but he actually flew in Vietnam. David Gibbs and Dirk Valley. But, yeah, and there's Mr. Clooney again. And we never went to see the movie, so I don't know if it was any good. This is a movie that I really liked. In El Paso, we had 2 H models. It was Courage Under Fire. And it starred Denzel Washington. And was Meg Ryan in that one? No. Oh, Meg Ryan was in it. But we had machines there for 3 months. So that was a good movie. That's one I didn't mind. This is one that we picked up at Rock Island Arsenal. The Mississippi was a flood state, and it was back-to-back blizzards. Really a good time to be pulling a trailer with a Huey on it. But, yeah, we did, and brought that one home. I can't tell you which one it was, but next slide. Some of them we flew home, some of them we trailered home. This is a movie shoot for the Batman Black Knight. Oh, not my kind of movie, but the check cleared. So we're standing on State Street over the Chicago River, and I'm telling you, it sounded awesome. You hear 2 Hueys coming down through those big tall buildings. And we had an H model and a B model there, and we didn't fly them back there, we trucked them, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have to land a Huey every 2 hours. They drink a lot of fuel. Next slide. This is when he got in Texas, and she needed a lot of work, but he was just leaving our house on it, had it on the trailer. And it finally ended up with olive drab paint as well. Next slide. And that's the B model up on Letcher's section up in the mountains. And he used to go up there and he fed the bears. And he would set up a camera in a barrel and had a pressure sensitive mat, and then it would take the bear's picture. He named them. Yeah. But yeah, he was eccentric, I guess you could say. And he was a very good friend, but he was different. Next slide. Oh, this is Al's Canadair Mark 6 F-86 Sabre. North American Aviation contracted with Canada to build the F-86. And it had the more powerful engine. The fighter pilots liked it best. You know, no substitute for horsepower. Next slide. Can you believe this picture was taken with the photographer standing on the ground? It looks like an air-to-air shot. Dave Sibley took that. He was standing out here on the ramp, and Al was flying over the mountains, and he had the doggondest lens you've ever seen. It was this big around and stretched out like, and he took that shot. And he's just wearing a headset. Anyway, yeah. It's a wonder he's wearing a headset. Next slide. I like that one with the clouds. And next one. Now I don't know who took that picture, but he was turning to land at Mojave. You're down. No flaps. Next slide. And this is one of the other F-86s he had. All of them had been at Flight Systems, hence the 80 Flight Systems in number. And these are just some other airplanes we had. A Lear 23, Hawker Hunter, Consolidated, PBY, UC-64, Norseman, Douglas A-26, Gloucester Meteor, and the Fouga Magister. Next slide shows the Lear 23. Now you flew those, didn't you? Hot rod, little hot rod. Yeah, we bought it and the engines were run out, but we went to Clarksville, Tennessee, and all I could think of was monkeys singing, "Take my next thing." But anyway, when he started walking out to that airplane, I knew they were flying a Learjet home. And we did. She was beautiful. Next slide. That's his Hawker Hunter. And originally it belonged to Al Letcher, and it was the first Hunter in the U.S. And it was a Danish Hunter. So all the books we had on it were in Danish.
Mojave,
You'd
can I
think
call you back
he'd
in a
be
bit?
able to read it because his ancestry is
Okay,
Danish.
about 20 minutes probably.
He couldn't. Anyway, next
All
slide.
right, good.
And that's the Hawker Hunter dressed up. It was in the movie The Right Stuff. And it was, they put a pointy nose on it and everything. It was supposed to look like the D558 that, what was it, Scott?
Crossfield.
Yeah. And it's the airplane that flies over the barbecue scene in The Right Stuff. And he said when he flew it, they didn't have a movie pilot, they had Al fly it. And this paint that they had put on it, a big section of it, he came off and went right through the engine. And you know, that's a little scary, but it didn't seem to hurt anything, did it? So, next slide. That's our PBY. And I could do a whole program on that because he traded an H model Huey for the PBY to a guy in Madrid, Spain. She had been a firebomber in Portugal. And so we went over to Spain to get this airplane, and I elected not to fly across the Atlantic. Dick wanted to go. He loves Madrid anyway, but he likes adventure. And this is the one where they had 5 handheld GPSs on board. They hit some bad weather, got in rain, and icing conditions, and all of a sudden the airplane is, the deck angles changing, the ice is coming down on the windshield. And Ron Sheardown is with him, and he says, we're going to go down a little lower, and they got down into the rain and washed it off, but the ice was forming on the props even and hitting the side of the fuselage. I'm so glad I wasn't on that trip. You'd have loved it. Yeah, I know. Next slide. There we are at Ketchikan. I had surgery again, and Al says, what can I do to help you to heal? I says, you know, I'd like a quiet little trip to Alaska. Why don't you call Ron Sheardown and see what we could see in Alaska? So he called Ron Sheardown. He says, if you're coming to Alaska, you've got to bring the PBY. I'll come down and help you fly it up. And so my quiet little trip to Alaska was in that. 2 weeks out of the hospital after major surgery, I'm headed to Alaska. And it was a magnificent trip. I came home commercial. Another trip Dick would have liked to have been on was coming home in that thing and the adventures that they had. You don't want to put a PBY on knife edge. Of course, I think we did that in the Voyager. Anyway, floats are down here. He did land at Ketchikan in the water and did a beautiful landing. But the wingtips come down for water landings, and then after you take off, they come back up again. Next slide. That's the Norseman, UC-64, and that was another one of their trade things. They needed to find a Norseman, and I remember Gordon Olson worked here, and he painted it. And I remember helping him lay out the invasion stripes because I wanted them just, you know, to be perfect. And funny story. We had the Norseman here, and Fitz Fulton wanted to fly it. And shoot, it's Fitz Fulton. Of course you can fly it. So Fitz gets in it and flies it, and he comes into land, and wouldn't you know, he took out 5 runway lights. But he's Fitz Fulton, it's okay. Next slide. He didn't hurt the airplane.
Wasted more there.
Yeah, well, more the lights there. There's the Gloucester Meteor. This is Skip Home, that's Neil Armstrong. That's when they were doing the TV series First Flights. And they were talking about the Meteor and the MiG-15. And at the time we had the P-51 Stiletto here. And was it Neil that called him that Meteor? Well, I don't know where the dead animals were. It's probably birds or something. But, this is the desert, for God's sake. Some guy was working on the S2, we sold it, and he was going on about a dead rabbit in the back. Well, I have a cat, and she likes to take kills up into the airplane, sorry. That's the Fuga. It's a French trainer, has a V-tail, little twin-engine jet. Oh, terrible on the ground. You just have to plug your ears. It's like a T-37 when it's taxiing. Horrible. He calls them vacuum cleaner engines. Next slide. That's what the Fuga looks like. But it was fun to fly, and it's a nice airplane in the air. That's our commander, 312 Mike. Just want to thank you for letting us share a few of our adventures with you. That was awesome. There's one.
I've got one on the B-29. Did the APU have a fire warning system or heat detector or anything?
Oh, Von Grout. Roger. Roger Von Grout. He flew the Caribou.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've been looking for that
And he
name.
was a cousin of the Red Baron.
Yes, he had to land that without flaps one time.
Right.
A hydraulic failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Matt Jackson, who now was flying Reno Air Races, he was the mechanic that replaced the mechanic that died.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
And he
wanted-
lost all of his tools and everything in that fire. Yeah.
There's a documentary out about
Yes.
T-Bird, right?
Yes. It's
Yes.
called B-29 Frozen in Time, and it was done by Nova.
Yeah,
And
I saw
every
that.
time it would show on TV, Bill Lingo over in Bakersfield would call us crying, saying, "I watched it again." It really was so sad that she burned up. I mean, she was a beautiful machine that had been brought to life again and was almost, gonna fly, almost. But Al did make a comment first thing when he got up there. He said, "I looked at that airplane and thought, she's gonna kill us." And that's
Almost
you
didn't.
know. Yes, sir.
Kathy, when I first got here in '78, and I didn't see it on your list, and the two Al's had
Vampires.
an English comment. No. No.
Vampires.
Yeah, the plywood vampires.
Yep, they did.
And Al used to get over the field and dogfight.
Yep.
And just out of the Air Force, I thought, wow, I'm going to go up and dogfight with them with my long easy or something. And I got up there and decided there's two guys trying to go at each other in jets, and I'm up there. Yes. This is really stupid.
I'm sure you would have shot us down.
I looked around and I thought, I don't know if I want to be here or not.
Well, Al said he'd hear in his headset, "You're dead." Just like kids playing Army in the backyard, these guys were doing it, in the airplane.
How did you get involved in all these interesting airplanes from the very beginning?
His first airplane was a T-28.
It's just been a long time messing around, but it is funny to go pop from one to another, but these things just came up to either in trade a plane or these trades with the Air Force Museum. That was really fun because, as I say, that guy that was in charge, he actually arranged to have probably almost all of the airplanes that are on display in Dayton at the Air Force Museum. And how did he get them? By making trades with guys that would mess around like we did.
That were dumb enough to go out and try to get them.
Al, did you know a guy at Long Beach Airport that had an Albatross? And I think it eventually ended up at Atwater.
Yeah, that guy.
Willard Marvin. Did you know Willard Marvin?
I don't remember that name, but
He was the owner of it. It sat on Long Beach Airport for quite a while, and then went up there.
I wish I could remember this guy's name that had it, and it was beautiful.
He made like a motorhome out of it, didn't he?
Yeah, pretty much. It was, but anyway, he gave me some lessons in mine and let
Okay.
me, trying to get a type rating or something. But anyway, a very congenial guy, but I think he took that up to Idaho or someplace.
Yeah, maybe that's a different one. It was either at Van Nuys or Whiteman. I know one of the kids, I call him a kid, he flew it for him. But the one at Long Beach, at one time at Long Beach, from the control tower, you could see a duck, a widgeon, the gooses were flying to Catalina,
Yeah.
and then the mallards and the albatross, they were all there. You could see them from the control tower.
He saw, was it Frank Tolman or Pomez, Luke the duck.
Oh.
Which one was flying that duck when you saw him, Luke?
Well, that's a big trauma.
Frank.
Yeah.
I can't imagine looping a Grumman duck.
Yeah, I
Wow.
would want to just fall back over.
Yeah. That's the only reason I'd watch Baba Black Sheep, because of course we loved the Corsair, but, and the shows were always corny, but the flying was fabulous,
Oh, yeah.
and they had the Grumman duck real often.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
Jim, one thing in those days when they were flying the gooses back and forth to Catalina, if you got down there, you get in the front of the line, and so you get to sit in the co-pilot seat, and they'd land out there in some pretty rough water, and it was really fun.
I went with him a couple of times, and the absolute best was early in the morning, landing with the sun, up a little ways, but landing right in the harbor. And then they taxied up the boat ramp. That's when they were using the
yeah.
boat ramp.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that wonderful? And the history of aviation in Southern California, and you think about where all the airplanes were built, and Reuben Fleet was consolidated, and we were doing a movie in Downey, and of course where they had a sound stage now, my God, the road used to be the runway, and it's what I walked in was going through the building, and in the entryway was this big round rug, and it said consolidated on it, and I wanted to roll it up and take it home, because God only knows what happened to that. Somebody probably threw it in the trash and thought it was junk. And oh my gosh, that kind of stuff means so much to me. And I love all the history. In Santa Monica Airport, Clover Field, that's where the Powder Puff Derby started. That's where the girls flew the airplanes, and I have a lot of the pictures, and Barbara has used them in the book. But so much history there. Donald Douglas built the DC-1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 7, the DC-6, all of them there.
Douglas World Cruisers.
And the Douglas World Cruisers, the big old biplanes, yeah. And when he flew that PBY home, he took the same route as the Nancy boats, the NC-4s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was reversed, but they flew from Madrid to Portugal to the Azores, to Newfoundland, and then across, came down through Canada was it?
Duluth.
Yeah, but you were in Timmins, Canada, or something like that, and then came down to
Oh,
Duluth.
at Timmins, yeah. The girlfriend was born the
Oh, Shania Twain, yeah. God, I would love to have a body like hers. But anyway, and be able to sing like that. But yeah, I do love all the history, and that's why I write about it all the time, because I want the young kids, the kids that are flying now and kids that aren't flying now, I want them to get inspired by these people. And Dick actually met a guy that was a pilot of one of those world cruisers. How cool is that?
Wow.
Wow. What year?
Lee Wade.
Lee Wade was his name.
He was
Yeah.
Boston.
Yeah.
Well, it was when we were dedicating the Voyager in the Smithsonian,
Right.
and he attended that thing, and here the guy that flew it around the world nonstop, and here's the guy that went around the world in the Douglas World Cruisers,
Yeah.
1924. And that's probably one of the greatest honors I've ever had. I'll never forget that.
Wow.
To be able to stand there and talk to that old guy.
Yeah.
And he died just a year or so after that.
Oh, oh.
But man, what a privilege that was.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you want to read some good stories, read about the guys that started the bush flying in Alaska in the 20s. And they're flying in open cockpit airplanes. You went cold? Oh my Lord. Yeah, yeah. Noel Wayne and some of those guys, they're just real heroes to me. And if you ever go to Anchorage, be sure and go to that museum that they have up there. It's fabulous. Well, we took the PBY up there to the Great Alaskan Salmon Bake and Flyby. And Al got to fly on a Grumman Goose while we were up there, which was cool. You don't get to do that every day. But it was, that PBY was a great airplane. He sold it to a guy who was going to go find Amelia Earhart. It ended up in Wyoming at Hawkins and Powers, and they are somebody like someone here on this airfield that the first thing they do is take it all apart and then run up a bill so much that you can't pay it, and then it's their airplane. So I don't know whatever happens to it. I can't say the name or I'd have to wash my mouth out.
What's his initials?
Hired a couple of lawyers.
D. That's what he does all the time. DS. Anyway.
Another thing, the two Al's were really famous. You know, Al Hansen and Al Letcher. And Al Letcher was a real character.
He was.
And he was going to find Amelia Earhart due to remote viewing.
That's right.
And he talked about that a lot. But we sat over there in Reno's restaurant, right in the corner booth,
Yes.
and had lunch with him one day, and he says he predicted that gold in the very near future will be worth over $1,000 an ounce. And we all thought he was about as crazy as a loon.
He was
$1,300,
right.
$1,400 an ounce.
Yes, and he had his own mint. And when he got out of the Navy in Alaska, he bought a, what was that machine called?
Powder metallurgy.
Powder metallurgy machine. And you could make coins with it. And he made coins, and I've got some of his coins. They're silver with a gold inlay from the Letcher Mint. But what he did was he made the tokens for Reno and Las Vegas. And he had Circus, remember the hydroplane? He had the Circus hydroplane out here at the boat. Anyway, he was an interesting fellow, and always had diverse interests, and was Al's best friend.
They were quite a pair, boy.
I gotta tell you a little story. They were invited, Al Letcher was invited to fly over Lancaster's, I don't know if it was a fair parade or what, but some parade. He had a P-51s, painted up like Singapore Sal. So, he flies down and the boulevard, and of course my Al was an airplane that was probably the radio wasn't working. He was in the Vampire. So he flew down, and it felt so good. You know, you turn around and you do it again. Well, meanwhile, Al Letcher is trying to tell him the FAA is here. Don't fly down again. And of course, this guy likes to get low. So the next thing you know, he's receiving a phone call, and I think they jerked his license for a while. But my son's friend came home and said, "You should have been there. It was awesome. This Vampire came down and he was so low. And he did it again." Oh yeah, Glenn Marshall loved that. So you made somebody happy, even if you didn't make the FAA happy. So that's all the tales I'm going to tell on him. There's plenty. So thank you all for coming, and I hope we didn't bore